I'm sure you all know that the cat and rat do not get along. If you didn't know this, that means you haven't been watching any Tom and Jerry tales. What a sad life. Anyway, it has been that way for centuries, and people just did not know why. Only our ancestors knew. Today, I will share that knowledge with you so that the next time you see the cat chasing the mouse, you will understand why. Here is the story.
There was a very powerful man who lived far away in a kingdom called Calabar. Everyone from far and wide feared him because he was very heavy-handed, but they all loved him at the same time because he was a fair king. Not only was he mighty and powerful, he was also very handsome and rich, and so he ruled with peace and love for over 50 years. Because the king was very rich, he needed someone who would take care and be accountable for all his jewels, diamonds, and gold coins, and it so happened that Cat was his housekeeper. Cat had served the king faithfully for several years and was very trustworthy. All the riches in the kingdom were put under his care, including everything in the storehouse. He never stole anything from the king, and therefore the king put all his trust in Cat. Eventually, Cat graduated from being the king's servant to practically being his right-hand man who would advise the king on certain issues of the kingdom and keep him company on days he was lonely, just like a friend would. The king also had a houseboy who was responsible for keeping the place clean, and that was Rat. The king so happened to have a very beautiful servant girl who he adopted as his daughter, whose beauty was so radiant that people would come from far and wide to gaze upon her face. That was actually one of the reasons the kingdom became very rich. To see his daughter, people would come bearing gifts of jewels and expensive perfumes to propose to her, but the king always refused. Eventually, Rat also took notice of the girl and fell in love with her. But he was very poor and had no money or gifts to offer her. He racked his brain back and forth, trying to figure out how he would ever be able to get her attention. Eventually, he thought about the king's store. One night, when the moon had altogether disappeared from the sky and a thick darkness swallowed the whole kingdom, Rat crept up quietly to the king's storeroom and made a small hole in the roof. He didn't face much difficulty, and when the hole was big enough to let him through, he jumped in and looked around intently. He then decided against stealing money, but stole some corn and pears, which were very rare at that time, and he presented them to his sweetheart the next morning. Rat continued his sneaky charade for quite some time, and eventually the end of the month came up. Cat then had to give account of all the stock in the storeroom, and got to find out that a lot of the corn and pears were missing, and unfortunately, he could not account for their loss. The king was so angry and highly disappointed at Cat, and ordered that if he could not produce the missing products, then he would be fired. Of course, Cat had no idea what was going on, and had no means in getting the treasured possessions back. So the king kicked Cat out and told him never to return to the palace. Cat was downcast for weeks. He had lost his job, his means of survival, and his best friend. So he wept for many days and became sad and lean. But one day, Spider decided to pay him a visit. And imagine the news Cat heard from Spider. Spider told him that even after Cat had left, a lot of corn and pears was still going missing from the king's storeroom. Investigations were held, and it was found that it was Rat who had been stealing the food. Cat was furious and so upset. He went back to the king to discuss the way forward. The king told Cat that he had sent for both the rat and the servant girl and had had them both punished, and had also dismissed the rat from his work. But unfortunately, he could not reinstate Cat, because the word of the king is final. Because of this, Cat was terribly angry, and decided from that time on that he and Rat would never get along. He chased Rat with the intention of catching him and killing him, but Rat also had his own clever ways. And so their rivalry still goes on till this day.